Hello and welcome to the City of Games. My name is Frank, and today I'm going to be kicking off my new lore series by telling you the origin story of the Emberlings. Now, if you're not familiar with the City of Kings world, we're going to have to go back nearly 14,000 years to when the Age of Beginnings ended and the Age of Prosperity began. You see, this was the time when the last fallen left the gates of the City of Kings, and they fell to the ground, and their essence spread to that around them. The rocks came to life. The trees uprooted and started to walk. This was when the risen first rose, and the animals in the area started an evolutionary process that took thousands of years, but brought life to much of the world. Now that is the simplified origin story of many of the races, the species that you're going to discover within the world, from the Sakura to the Fedorans, the dwarfs and the elves. But that is not how the Emberlings came to be. You see, their origin was slightly different, and it just so happened that at the moment that event took place, a gust of wind spread past, and with that, several leaves blew in close proximity, and they started to shine. They started to burn blue. They started to look like they were on fire. And one of these leaves became the ember leaf. This leaf flew high up into the sky, and it spread across much of the land. It touched down in places, leaving traces of this blue essence before it blew off again to another area. Eventually, it arrived deep in a forest where it settled, and small creatures in the area grabbed the leaf and started to turn it into part of their home. They didn't know at the time that whilst this leaf didn't have the same powers as the fallen that fell, it still had some power to it. It wasn't enough to create a giant being, to bring the trees or the rocks to life, but it was enough that the smaller creatures around it started to rise from the floor. And not only that, but the trail of where the leaf had blown to its journey to this point, it had also interacted with other creatures, other small beings of the world. And as they stood up and evolved and started to have the ability to talk and to think in a larger capacity, they wondered if there was more to the world, if there were more beings. And as these creatures walked and travelled, they began to follow the pathway of the leaf. They started to discover more that were like themselves. And all of these creatures eventually ended upon where the ember leaf settled, at which point there was great villages, these giant constructions where hundreds and thousands of similar but different beings had begun to build. You see, this was the moment where the Emberlings realized that they weren't just small creatures anymore, but they were capable of much more. They became very community-driven, and they accepted all that those came. Everyone who joined them from all different places. And this is one of the reasons that the Emberlings are so diverse. There are so many different creatures, so many different beings living together, and they found ways to coexist. They've helped us effectively terraform parts of the central part of this forest to give them the more stone-like areas that they needed, the waterside areas, the clearer meadows among the trees. And now they all live there. The interesting thing is, and this is something we'll explore more in the future, is the ember leaf wasn't just the only leaf to do this at the time. And whilst the Emberlings followed the pathway and ended up together, there may be other creatures out there as well. There may be other beings out there that followed a similar path but never managed to connect. And what we'll discover in the future is hopefully more of these beings will unite and we'll encounter all sorts, from the more animalist kind of creatures that we have to perhaps more of the more unusual races and beings that we have in this world. But for now, that's it. That is the origin story of the Emberlings. I don't want to go too much into that bigger picture, but hopefully that lets you know kind of where they came from, how they came to be, why there's so many different creatures altogether living in this way. And if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. And as always, until next time, keep on adventuring.